the Observer's Calendar for July 2025 on episode 489 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the night sky, and this podcast is for everyone who enjoys going out under the stars. So this month, Shane, we've got Mercury very low in the west-northwest in the evening sky. We've got Venus in the east-northeast in the morning sky. Mars is very low, not really worth taking a look at in the west in the evening. And Jupiter is rising after 4 a.m. in the twilight of the morning. And Saturn is rising before 1 a.m. So it's starting to get nice and high there in the morning sky now in July. So you can start looking forward to some early morning Saturn observations if you're so inclined to get up for them.
Yeah, and see the rings pretty much edge on.
Yeah, they're coming around. I think, is it October, November? They're at their minimum viewable
hmm
angle from Earth or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. So they'll get a little bit thinner between now and then, of course, but it's while it's not as pretty, it's still a neat thing to observe.
Mm. I think, isn't that what happened to Galileo when he first looked at Saturn? They were edge on. He
Yeah, I
first
think
thought
so.
they were ears and then they were edge on, and then so he never
Yeah,
really confirmed his observations, something like that.
yeah,
Well, July 1st, that's Canada Day.
it is.
So,
Yes.
yeah, are you gonna do your solar observing? Because that's like a big thing here. They take the solar scopes out
Yeah, the
usually.
local club will be set up in Wascana Park, which is a fairly large park in Regina. And there's a whole bunch of different things going on there, a bunch of festivities. And yeah, the club will have multiple solar H alpha telescopes. And I'm not sure if they'll have any white light or not, but I know they have a spot and there will be people showing the sun.
Awesome. And July 2nd, we have the first quarter moon. And also on July 2nd, we have the Lunar X
Cool.
visible near the crater Werner. So, have you seen the Lunar X recently? And what is it again?
Um, Trying to think if I've seen it recently. I would say no, I have not seen it
Hmm.
recently, but just a clair obscure effect of shadow play with, how things are illuminated by sunlight versus in shadow, and it just appears as an X. And
Hmm.
as always, when the lunar X is out, so is the lunar V, just a little further up the terminator.
Hmm. July 3rd, we have Spica within about a degree of the moon, just on the north side-ish, but for us anyway, it is not that close. It's got to be 7 or 8 degrees away from Spica. Although once it gets to the horizon, maybe it's getting close to 6 degrees away from Spica. But maybe for Hawaii or Japan or Australia, I think should be able to see it quite a bit closer, I think. But probably Hawaii would be the best spot if anybody was listening from down there. Um, Considering we don't have that, the lunar straight wall is visible on July 3rd.
Yeah, another clair obscure effect.
And July 4th, we have US Independence Day, and Mercury is at its greatest elongation at 26 degrees from the sun in the evening sky.
Okay, but still fairly low on the horizon, and 26 degrees does not mean 26 degrees up from the horizon, unfortunately.
Right, right. Actually, I'm just looking at my little chart here now, and it's kind of neat. I think it's almost over the Beehive cluster, or I should know the star, but it's the star in the center of Cancer. But because of the angle of the ecliptic being so low and flat at this time of year, um, it means that Mercury, while 26 degrees from the sun, is only about 7 or 8 degrees up, but you can still see it 7 or 8 degrees up in fairly dark evening twilight around 9 or 9:30 p.m. Here probably 10 p.m. would do the trick.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we have Mars just over to the left. On July 5th, we have that jeweled handle visible on the moon. I think that's one of those objects from Marie Noonan, who I didn't get to see when I was in Ontario, but it's a lunar feature that's visible when the moon is around first corner, and it appears on the Mont Jura mountain range. Was the general area. So I've seen it once now. Have you been able to see that one? It's pretty cool.
No, well, not that I know of.
Yeah.
Some of these you may have observed it, just you weren't aware.
Yeah, I've seen that one. July 7th, we have Antares just over half a degree north of the moon. But for us, in evening twilight, it's about 6 or 7 degrees away. And, you really want to be east. So probably anywhere in the Eastern time zone or on the East Coast of North America is probably your best bet to see it in a darkish sky. So that would be Antares and the moon in the same binocular field just after full moon
Mhm.
or before full moon. Because on the 10th, we have the full moon.
Right.
And then on the 12th, we have Mare Orientale visible on the moon, which I have seen a few times. And that's worth seeing. If you've never
Hmm.
seen that before, best to go out during evening twilight and to take a look at that. Have you seen that one before, Shane?
Yeah, a long time ago. I should get out and have another look at that, though.
Yeah, this is one of those libration effects because the moon kind of appears to wobble in its orbit because the moon kind of moves along in its orbit and we move forward and backwards in our orbit. It enables us to see about 59% of the lunar surface. And so it's just over the edge of the moon as we see it. So people can look that up and take a peek. And then also on the 12th, trying to put these in with star charts too, is the carbon star T Lyrae, which is best on the July 12th evening. And it's a carbon star that's what, maybe 2 degrees away from Vega? Looks like to the west.
Okay.
So I don't know that I've seen that one before, although I've viewed a lot in that area. I must have picked it up at one point in time. But there's nights because these carbon stars are variable stars and they pulsate. And there's nights where the redness is at its best because of the phase that they're in. And so Maria has gone through and calculated all those and given them to us, which is pretty cool. All right, and the Cleomenes rays, they're visible on July 13th. So this is another set. Have I seen these? I think I have seen these. They're just like right on Mare Crisium. Yeah, I'm just looking up here to confirm that. Pretty sure I have seen these ones. But again, they're visible better on some nights than others because of the angle of the sun and the moon and libration and all this stuff. And so Marie's gone through and figured out that July 13th is one of the best nights to see that. And then as well, this week of July 13th, anyway, um, you can try to see Arcturus before sunset this week. So that's an
Hmm.
interesting challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Anytime you can see a star with the sun in the sky, it's kind of a neat observation.
It's pretty low down though, so from here, from our latitude, it could be a bit challenging.
Yeah, that would be pretty hard.
July 16th, Saturn, Neptune, and the moon congregate in the morning sky. And not really sure where Neptune is. I think it's like right beside Jupiter or something in the glare. But then Uranus is to the upper right, which it's right by the Pleiades, sort of between the Pleiades and the Hyades. Um, but yeah, I mean Neptune, you really need a telescope to see. But I think it's right on with Jupiter. But Jupiter would just be right above the horizon. So I don't know about seeing Neptune and all this, but be able to see Jupiter and Venus pretty easily. And then if you have your binoculars and star chart, you can find and ferret Uranus out from the star field near the Pleiades. July 17th, we have the last quarter moon, and that's when the lunar Curtis X is visible. I think I hunted this one down once a few years ago. Can't recall exactly what it. Have you ever hunted down like the X and the V and all this stuff?
Well, the Warner X and the V for sure. The Curtis X I've seen once, and I believe it's a little less prominent than the Warner X. But
Yeah,
again, this is one I should probably have another look at because it has been a while.
kind of feel like, I mean, like when I look at the moon and I'm seeing the lunar X, I feel like the lunar X, if you catch it right, it's really, really cool to see. Lunar V is it's okay, but kind of beyond that, it's like, well, yeah, when you look at the moon, you can see a lot of features. I mean, sure enough, the straight wall is amazing to look at. There's also the snake or the S on the moon. I forget which it's by Schroeder, I think is the crater it's by. That one's pretty cool. There's a few that are really quite amazing. I mean, it's a lava tube that has collapsed. But anyway, kind of beyond a certain point. I mean, yeah, when you look at the moon, you just see a lot of really cool mountain ranges and features. So yeah, people can try for these ones, but certainly look for your own. July 21st, we have the carbon star Z Pisceum, which is in Pisces. It's really, if you kind of imagine it, it's kind of about a third of the way from Alpheratz from Hamel in Aries. So it's in Pisces, but Pisces is between Aries and Andromeda or Andromeda and Pegasus there. So almost the triangle of Triangulum almost points to it, kind of, sort of, but it's can't be too far away from, or I guess just north of M77 or M74 or one of those. So should be well worth seeing. I kind of think I saw this one in 2023 when I first got those 12 by 36 Canons binoculars. On July 23rd, Jupiter is 5 degrees south of the moon in the morning sky, but for us, oh, it's just over 5 degrees. So you want to be a little bit further towards the east, definitely on the east coast, be able to see that quite well in the morning sky. And that's pretty close to being an old crescent. They say that the old crescent is visible on the 24th, but Shane, I had to put a diagram in. Almost looks like something out of some sort of symbol of something or something because you kind of have the 5 degree circle bisecting the moon and the sun almost perfectly. And I think that the moon is too close. I'm going to say this. The moon is too close to the sun to try to observe this old crescent on the 24th. Anything closer than about a dozen degrees or so, unless there's some sort of particular setup, or even 20 degrees, I feel like is getting a bit shady on anything close to the sun. Because your fist at arm's length is 10 degrees. You definitely want it at least a few fist lengths away. You don't want to look at the sun through a telescope by accident. And then we have new moon later in the day on the 24th. And also the Stellafane
Mm.
convention is that weekend
Where
around
is that?
new moon. Excuse me, that's in New Hampshire,
Okay.
on Breezy Hill, I think it's called. And have you ever been to New Hampshire?
No.
Well worth going. Very beautiful.
Hmm.
You can drive up. I've been there a few times, driven up Mount Washington, which is the 62 odd thousand foot high peak, and it's like the place of the worst weather in the world or something like that. It's like the worst weather. You get the highest winds, the coldest temperatures. We went up on this beautiful day, and it was like, 1 degree and raining at the top, basically. It was just like mist, like you're just in the clouds. And they've had, I think, the coldest temperatures in North America, and the highest winds are within shooting distances of that. And they routinely get them too. So there's like an Arctic outflow there. So the coldest temperatures I've ever experienced were just down the flank of that. Because when I was a kid, I used to be into skiing, and I was training near Mount Washington. And I think when we were there, I feel like it got to like minus 50 or something like that. It was, you don't think of that as New Hampshire. You think of that as must be in the Arctic or somewhere, but it can get really, really cold there. At least with the wind chill, it was minus 50 anyway, but it was like the coldest December on record there. But definitely more like Saskatchewan winters there with quite a bit more snow and then intermittently some warmer temperatures as well. But New Hampshire really can have some wild, unpredictable winter weather. And that's where it is. That's where Stellafane is. And that's where people go with their, a lot of people with telescopes that they've built. Some of the people I know who are telescope builders go there and they all set up on this sort of rocky hill and they have this big pink clubhouse on that hill. Pretty neat.
Hmm,
I would love to
interesting.
go sometime. Yeah. Should have probably went when I lived closer because you can drive there. I've driven, when I lived in Nova Scotia, I went to New Hampshire and tried to buy a telescope. That's where I bought my first copy of Burnham's Celestial Handbook, was just near Breezy Hill and near where the convention takes place. But I didn't go. I just wasn't as aware of star parties as I am today. You know what's happening this coming week, June 24th, I think is when the Oregon Star Party starts up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they have good weather.
Yeah, I mean it looks like it because they're going to have these storms having moved through, or the early parts of these storms will have already moved through, and then it looks like it's not too bad. I was surprised how early it was. Typically, star parties more July and August. June, I don't know. I wonder if it's because last year I know they got canceled because of a forest fire. So I wondered if that's maybe why they had elected to take it a little bit earlier in the year, which is kind of cool. I know a few people going down to that, so really neat.
Hmm.
Um, and then July 25th, we're going to have the Carbon Star RU Virginis at its best tonight. And that's in Virgo, and it's getting towards setting. So you want to get to that one early in the evening. I really want to try to observe these carbon stars. On the 26th, we have the Carbon Star 5 Auriga best in the early morning. I was like, wait, did Marie make a mistake? How can we look at an Auriga star in the morning sky in July? And it's very high in our sky here, Shane. Surprisingly so.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, carbon stars are something I don't spend enough time on, and I really need to make that part of the double star routine because you can look at a carbon star from pretty much anywhere.
Mm. Yeah, and the color is pretty good. I was looking at we were looking at La Superba, Bill Weir's favorite carbon star, if I recall correctly, up in Canas Venatici. And man, oh man, that's one heck of a carbon star. If people want to sort of a gateway drug into carbon stars, that's a good one to start with. So I think there was another one I was looking at one night, but you really can see that color through a 7-inch refractor. Anyway, I'll be going after these as long as we get a night. And maybe if we do have smoke or some light smoke and it's not too bad, the red will even be further enhanced. July 28th, we have Mars 1.3 degrees from the moon, but here we get it just within that 5-degree circle finally. So you can see Mars and the moon in your binocular, Shane, at long last.
Beautiful.
Mm. The 29th, we have the South Delta Aquarid meteors in the pre-dawn sky over a few days, 29th and 30th, maybe 31st, maybe 28th. And you'll get a zenith hourly rate of only about 25, but these ones really show up quite well. I think they kind of skirt the southern horizon. One of my favorites, and typically, you know, newish moon or very, early waxing moon. So it's not going to be in the sky in those early morning hours. And these ones are more meaningful to us since they're associated with Comet 96P McColl's, which is one of the discoveries of Don Machholz, who we had on the show a couple times and lots of correspondence with. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple years ago.
Hmm.
So Here's some objects. We have Have I seen any? I don't think I've seen any of these. These are from Marie. Oh, well, I've seen M6 and 7. But the ones that Marie put in for the month, these are pretty tough for us here, Shane. NGC 6139 is a seventh-ish magnitude globular cluster. I think it passes only about a degree and a half or 2 degrees above our southern horizon here in
Mhm.
Saskatchewan. But if you're further south, see, many of the listeners might be in Florida or whatever. This would actually be not even too bad from, maybe even a town or park or something in Florida, where I think we have many listeners. NGC 6139 is globular cluster for people that are further south. We had this open cluster. This one's like about fifth magnitude. We might be able to get this one here. Looks like this one rises a couple degrees, but you kind of have to wait for it to be past the meridian because here in June and in early July, we have this perpetual twilight. And so that means that there are some objects which are never at the meridian in a dark sky here, because even earlier in the year, they're um, they're going to be in the morning twilight, and later in the year, they're going to be in the evening twilight, but they never pass through this zones. But early in the evening, you can try for it. Fifth magnitude open cluster shouldn't be too bad. Might be able to get that one in
Mhm.
Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Then we have another globular NGC 6441. I think again it's like a seventh magnitude, and it's just south of Ptolemy's cluster. I think I've seen this one. It's about the same altitude as Shola, so it's a little bit higher than the others, but not remarkably so. And then of course we have Messier 6 and 7 that are well placed and easy to see in a binocular large field telescope or binocular field of view here from a dark site. You can see these, but really M7 seems like it's about the lowest down thing ish that you can see on a lot of nights, maybe apart from Shola on an excellent night. But on the best nights, that's when you can see Shola and less of the other star there. They kind of look like a set of eyes peeking over the horizon. But we don't get a lot of nights where you can see anything down in that zone if there's anything in the atmosphere. And then I put in an email here towards the end, Shane. Not sure if it's from a new listener, Akshay. Do you want to give this one a read?
Yeah, sure. Says, hi, Chris and Shane. I hope you're doing well. I've been listening to the podcast since the beginning of the year and have really enjoyed your discussions on all things astronomy. I started amateur astronomy in November of last year and have quickly become obsessed with the hobby. I wanted to thank you for creating the podcast. Your discussions on observing and equipment have been a huge help as I navigate the vast array of telescopes, eyepieces, mounts, and other gear on offer. In my short observing journey, I have so far only been able to observe from large cities. Until recently, I lived right next to New York City in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I just moved to Atlanta, Georgia. My main observing instrument is an 8-inch Aptura Dobsonian. I enjoyed looking at all of the planets earlier in the year, and more recently, I've enjoyed some of the spring and early summer DSOs. I've honestly been surprised at how much can be seen from city skies, since I was not expecting to be able to see much beyond the planets. Recently, I've been observing M13 as it gets higher in the sky. A couple weeks ago, on a moonless night, I was astonished by how many stars I could see in the cluster at about 150 to 200 power with averted vision. I think globulars are currently my favorite class of deep sky objects. I have also enjoyed looking at M3, M5, M22, and M92. Do you have any advice on improving my observations of globulars? I have read that higher power can help, but I find that beyond about 200 power, the image gets a little too dim for my eyes. I am also looking to get out of the city to some darker skies, but I've been a bit nervous to go to my club's dark site. It seems like people get really annoyed at any excess light. So far, I have primarily used Stellarium on my phone to star hop. I use the Twilight app to dim the screen's brightness so that I can barely see the screen, and it makes the display red. But I'm unsure if that is enough. I recently did acquire the Pocket Sky Atlas and will try to star hop using that instead, but I really appreciate the ability to tune the visible magnitude and match the display to what is in my Finder on the apps. In your experience, do most people use paper maps and atlases to locate objects at dark sky sites? Thanks again for the podcast. Excited to listen to the next episode from Akshay.
Thanks for listening and writing in. Actually, I did reply. I asked him a few more questions, didn't hear back yet. But all right, Shane, do you have any advice for Akshay or anybody else listening on how to maybe get more out of observing globular clusters or improving their observations on globular clusters?
Well, first off, I thought that this was a really, really good email when I read it earlier in the week. Just because, I think like we like you and I think maybe take dark skies for granted because of how easy, we have access to them. And, you and I don't think anyway, really look at DSOs in the city because we drive 20 to 30 minutes and, we're in fairly dark skies.
Hmm.
And dark skies certainly improve DSOs, but this is a really good reminder for me that you can still observe them in the city. There's still stuff to see, especially with globulars and open clusters. Galaxies, you can see some of those, but the brighter ones are what you're going to have to target if you're in the city. But anyway, I really appreciate that,
Hmm.
Akshay is doing this from light polluted skies and, is getting some good observing in. And the other thing too, which we really haven't talked too much about, is when you do increase the magnification, you kind of make the you kind of reduce the light coming through, like everything appears dimmer. So in a way, you sort of control some of that light pollution. So I'm glad that actually is using some higher power.
Hmm.
I don't know. The only other thing maybe would be like a light pollution filter. I haven't used those very much to, confidently say, if they make a big difference on DSOs from light polluted skies, but I do know some people enjoy using them and get good results. So that might be something. But yeah, really, I think actually is doing everything that I would do. Do you have any thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, I think that using that higher power, 150 to 200 magnification, 8-inch telescope, really like that's your golden zone, I think, for making deep sky observations. So I think that he's doing well. Either he figured that out for himself, or they figured it out for themselves, um, or they read that somewhere. So they've got that one. That's a win. Um, and the other is that they're considering going out to a dark sky site. We'll get into that in a second. I think that's probably going to be your biggest win in all this.
Hmm.
Sadly, or maybe not so sadly, you have a club there with a reasonably dark sky site, I think, and and that's going to help you out. The other thing you could try doing if you're up for it is, and I sent this back in the email, but it goes to anybody as well, is to maybe try sketching because that's really going to help focus you and you'll be able to put down some of those stars and features that you see in the globular, and as you focus that attention, it causes you maybe to spend a little bit more time or care or attention perhaps, and to see just a little bit more. But yeah, I think they're on a great path considering that they're already doing a lot of the things that they ought to be doing. To make some great observations. And then as well, once you get into the darker sky sight, Shane, kind of like as you were saying, really get into those galaxies and other objects because the 8-inch telescope can really bring in
Hmm.
quite a bit of light. So that's a telescope that can last them for many, many years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful scope. It's one of the best balances of aperture versus portability.
Mm,
And they just work. They're a simple design, and
yeah,
they never disappoint.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The next question was about, well, it didn't put so much of a question, but they talked about getting out to the Club Dark Sky site, but being nervous as people get really annoyed at any access light. I suppose perhaps I'm kind of sort of maybe like one of those people. However, I wrote this back, Shane. I don't know what you think about this. Is I get it. I get it from both sides. I would say just reach out because if somebody reaches out and say, "Hey, I really want to come out to the Dark Sky site, but I don't want to break any of these rules. I'm new. I want to learn the rules. I want to be able to come to a dark site. I want to observe with other people, and I want to be able to make my own observations at a dark sky site. But I want to know how to do this because I haven't done this before with other people." If somebody did that, and I've had that many times, then that's great. People will embrace that. They'll real like you're going to be way ahead of the next person who shows up with bright lights and has to spend the next year, apologizing for being that person. But so, and I think that's going to bring your observing to a whole different level as well to get out with other folks. And Atlanta's nice and far south. So there's a lot of great objects. Should be able to see Omega Centauri from there at this time of year. So I would definitely try to get out to that club site and observe with other people. And yeah, just reach out, let them know. I mean, if it's a club, there should be club meetings. You should be able to kind of go and very quickly ID who those maybe curmudgeons like me are that might be a little bit cantankerous at bright lights coming in, but they're not cantankerous about new observers. It's just the lights that, and the interruption and everything. So you want to find out what the preferred mode is because what we say here may not be the way that they do it in Atlanta. In fact, I'm pretty sure, however they run their club and however they do their dark sky observing there might be a little bit different than how we might do it here. So I'd say, yeah, just reach out to them and see what the rules are and see if you can meet somebody out there who can kind of walk you through. The other thing is, Shane, is that a lot of these clubs have like an orientation night for new observers, I think, typically. They might even do it on sort of a quarter moon or something, or even closer to a full moon, so that if people do come out and people might be more forgiving on those nights or something, so they can even inquire to see if they have like an orientation night. I know in Halifax at the St. Croix Observatory, that's what they would do, and they would take us out if you were a new member. I remember being a new member and going out on one of those orientation nights. Also, some of the clubs I know the local club here has a barbecue at the Dark Sky site, which is a slightly different sort of event. Usually, there would be observing afterwards, but again, that could be sort of a gateway into getting out there and observing. So I think that would be my advice anyway. Not sure if you have any.
Yeah, or just show up to the site without any gear, get to know some of the folks, look through their telescopes, and just see how they observe. And if you see other folks using dimly lighted phones or tablets, then it's okay. And if you don't see that, you can easily ask and just see what they tell you.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of different ways to approach it. And the other thing too is observing with paper. I once you get used to it, it works quite well too. And I can appreciate
Mm.
what Akshay is saying about customizing the view, on his phone to
Hmm.
match the magnitude of stars in the field of view. That's certainly a great way to do it. But again, once you get used to the Pocket Sky Atlas, it's a very usable atlas. It's great in the field. I still use one of those today when I'm
Yeah.
not using my digital setting circles, or if I even need to validate the field, that I'm looking at.
Yeah. I I I use both. I have it's not a tablet, but it's an iPhone. It's a separate iPhone from my own like iPhone that I use. It's a slightly older one, slightly larger one, so it's almost like a small tablet. And the reason why I did that is that I don't think I did the same thing I actually did, but what I did is I did two levels of dimming on it. And so it's really, really dimmed down. And it seems like it's about good enough, but I continue to fiddle with it. I think I have it a little bit on the bright side now. Um, but I find it pretty futzy to move back and forth from my regular phone. I think I tried that once or twice, and yeah, it's so dim that I have to like go to a dark spot. I can't really use it for anything else. And then it's got these two layers because I think there's a layer where you can dim the brightness on the phone. There's a layer where you can make it red, and then I think there's like another layer where you can make it sort of extra dim and extra red, like in some sort of deep setting somewhere. So you can play with it to get it to work. It's just I find it difficult to transition from one to the other because after I'm done observing and the next day then I want to use my phone, it's like, oh, I have to kind of go and redo all that. And I always forget one of the steps and mess something up. So I have a separate old phone that I use for it. Um, Between printed paper atlases and whether it's an iPhone or an iPad or a computer, because I have the software on my computer too. So I do use the software and I use it quite a bit. I use it to make up our notes for the show with the finer charts and everything. It's great. But Shane, the one downside I find with this with the software is sometimes there's like a setting that won't stick or something. And for whatever it is that I'm trying to look at, when I'm trying to switch back and forth, like I was looking at carbon stars and some of the stars and whatever in the constellations, then I couldn't get the deep sky, even though I clicked the right buttons and whatever. I kind of had to stop and reload it. Like I got into some sort of little glitch, which can happen with any software. In general, I find Sky Safari excellent, but it's great, sitting in my house and I can just kind of figure it out. It took like a minute to figure out. But if I'm at the telescope, I don't like figuring stuff like that out as much. I like to have that paper chart there with all the objects that I want to see that night. Sometimes I find like it's great for like loading in and going to that one object like with the telescope. But if I want to see like my full list of objects. I have my list loaded into my software now, and that works fine, but sometimes it's difficult to like zoom out to look at all the objects and figure out where I want to go next while I'm still on the object. I mean, it's just like kind of my own workflow, but I do like having that paper chart handy too. Or sometimes, like I'm doing Planetary Nebula right now, and I'm like, oh, well, tonight's not good enough to do Planetary Nebula, what I'm going to look at. And then I just like having that chart. Okay, well, like this is the part of the sky that seems like it's the best. All right, like what do I want to focus in and look at here? And then the other thing is that I find like dark nebula sometimes don't show up that well. There's a lot of nebula that don't have like a proper magnitude associated with it. And if that's the case, often it can be difficult to figure out where that object is. So as far as how many people use paper maps and atlases to locate objects at dark sky sites, it's probably a mixed bag. I think mostly with the imagers, they're using these softwares, of course.
Hmm.
And then for the visual observers, I think it's mostly using the charts. And I'll say this, my observatory here is like a Bortle 3, Bortle 4 in sort of the worst part of the skies. But I find that I can dim my phone down and it's fine. I still continue to play with it. When I get to a really dark sky site like in the grasslands, the phone at even the dimmest setting seems too bright. Like I just can't get it. And I have to dim it down so much and it's so small, like I have to like hold it really close to my eye and it just doesn't seem to work that well. Versus a chart, they're pretty big and they're like at a uniform scale. You're not like zooming in and zooming out. And that zoom in and zoom out, like I hear what he's saying about getting that scaling, that can be helpful, but at the same time, um, it can be difficult to kind of use that in the long term. I think it's really helpful to have the experience with both. I just like to be able to have that chart. Then of course there's nowhere like your chart isn't going to run out of battery, right? Just make sure you have an extra battery for your red light, I suppose. But typically a battery in a red light will last for years.
Yeah, yeah, and the other thing too, for anybody considering this at a dark sky site, you won't be the only person with a illuminated device because inevitably there's going to be people observing with go-to mounts with a hand paddle typically that is illuminated in red. The display and all of the buttons are glowing red. So, if you try to match sort of that light
Mm.
output, you're safe. You're not any more impactful than those folks are. So I wouldn't be too intimidated because you'll certainly, again, you're going to run into people using some form of light out there. It's
Mm.
just to try to be respectful when you are, maybe referencing your phone. And like, for example, when I'm using my red light to light up my charts, I always make sure it's pointed down and, never sort of parallel to the ground or anything like that, because then I might get it in somebody's eye. So, if you take that into consideration, I think you'll be pretty safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. Had a quick email from Alistair this morning. He's doing some real nice summer observing. He spent about 90 minutes observing the prancing horse, and he sent us along a sketch of that. Took me a minute to kind of get that. And anyway, he said it's a rough sketch. I kind of had to read his notes, but he said not having. So the prancing horse is a dark horse nebula complex, and he used a blank star field. To save himself from spacing out the dots inaccurately. And then he added in the strong slants for dark, and the density of the slants trying for opacity, and side sweeps for bright background. And of course, there are zones that have both. Presumably, I will tidy this up at some point in the future. He said, wishing you clear skies, Alistair. So, yeah, it took me a sec. I kind of looked at it, couldn't figure it out. I went back, read the email again. I was like, oh, okay. So I can kind of see where he had sort of penciled in the dark nebula of the prancing horse. Love it. Great sketch of a dark nebula. I'm assuming it's naked eye, but he didn't say if it was naked eye or binoculars or anything. But oh, last night in binoculars. It is in binoculars. My apologies. So great sketch. Thanks for that, Alistair.
Yeah, appreciate that.
All right. Anything else to add to this show, Shane?
That is all, sir.
All right. Please subscribe, share the show with other stargazers you know. Send us your show ideas, observations, and questions to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.